My name is Rose, and I am here to just share a little bit about my experience during COVID 19. COVID 19 is an event that happened, was known all over the world, it was all over the news. I have seen a lot of events, but they're not covered in the news. I came to know about COVID in February of 2020 where people started talking about it. It was all over the news, but it wasn't in US by then. It was outside of country like the Asian continent and then the European continent. It did not reach the American continent yet by then. In March, that's when the first case was discovered in New York. That's when people started talking about it. In March 10, the World Health Organization declared COVID 19 as a nationwide pandemic, and President Trump also declared a state of emergency where a lot of states started shutting down. However, I was still working because I was a case manager and a career coach. So a lot of immigrants who I work with or who knew about our organization came in because they needed help with unemployment services. One thing I came to realize right away is that the pandemic came in and then it hit the immigrant community more than any other communities. Language barrier and technology barrier, that was the first thing. We filed for unemployment, and then not everybody was qualified for unemployment. And after that, we started helping people apply for Medicaid and food assistance. And to my surprise, that was the first time for me to also know that not everybody is eligible for it. Only people who are permanent resident or U.S. citizens who are eligible for all this government assistance. So this pandemic affected the immigrants community more than anybody else in the U.S. Racially, economically, and healthcare, and in so many ways. And also, like, with the higher percentage of them getting COVID is really high because they're the frontline workers. You know, they work at the restaurants, they work at hotels, they work in meat factories and other factories, and they cannot do anything about it because they work to provide, because the government is not helping them. All the assistance, all the government aid that was actually given, immigrants that are undocumented are excluded from those help. Therefore, they have no choice than to work just to provide for their children to make ends meet. And one thing that strike me the most, that make me feel that we are living in a world that is just messed up, right? So during COVID also, we know that it affected immigration services. So many refugees who are outside of countries cannot come to the U.S. because of borders that were closed, and then the immigration services are all shut down. And that's the first time actually for the resettlement agency to see that drastical change in resettlement services. So in 2020, no refugees were brought, or maybe very, very small number. So for the first time since 1981, they have never experienced such a thing. So the numbers really, really, really decreased. However, with immigrants, it's even worse. The U.S.-Canada border was closed. The U.S.-Mexico border was closed. And that caused tens of thousands of people remain in immigration detention despite the high risk of COVID, right? Transmission in crowded jails, prisons, and detention centers. The U.S. Immigration and Custom Enforcement, the ICE, uses to hold citizens. So the pandemic led the suspension of many immigration courts hearing and limited the functioning of the few courts which remained open or few reopened. So if you're in detention center, pretty much you're waiting court, whether you will be deported or you will be released. So pandemic caused them to actually sit in the detention center. And the place is so crowded, and a lot of them are getting COVID, and so many of them are dying actually. And we have seen in the news like how many people have died in prisons and in detention centers, and that's just something that is unforgettable. I will never forget about the incident of COVID-19 and the impact of it in our immigrants communities. So I'm grateful that at least is getting better. That is just a history, and I hope that this history will not repeat itself. And I also pray that these immigrants also will obtain their documents so that they will get all this fair treatment.